Well, welcome to Finding Resilience. Again, thank you again for joining us this morning. Kira, I'll let you take it from here, perhaps.
Oh, all right. Um, so before we dive in, we really just we do want to make an acknowledgement of the land that we are on. I'd like to acknowledge that I am on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish, Coast Salish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And I'd like to invite everybody to take a moment and think about and honor the traditional territory that you are standing on, whatever land you are visiting us from today. I invite you to bring awareness to your feet and sense your feet on this land. And we'll just take a deep breath together, just noticing our feet. And as you push your feet into the floor and the ground beneath your feet, perhaps sense the connection to the earth below, where generations of Indigenous people have and continue to breathe, stand, learn, and resist centuries of colonization. The picture you're seeing is of the reconciliation pole at UBC Vancouver campus, which is on traditional Musqueam territory. And whenever we're all back there, I always find it an important place to stop by sometimes, just to remember where UBC decided to plant its feet. There's no kind of natural transition between those two topics, but I wanted to kind of dive into the issue at hand today. Really, we're here to talk about stress and stress management and finding a way to kind of feel resilient in a time that I think I just want to acknowledge has been hard for all of us. Michelle and I do this presentation a lot with students. And this is the first time we're doing it with our colleagues. And so we just want to acknowledge that we'd love to hear kind of how things are going for everybody. The chat is open. We'd love people to kind of throw questions in or throw thoughts in. We also have been in this weird way of living for the last 11 months. And so we realize that we're kind of presenting, but we'd also love to hear thoughts from everybody else as well. So what are we talking about when we're talking about stress? One of the things I really like to remind people about is that stress serves a function. Stress serves a purpose. Stress is activated in that fight, flight, freeze response center in our brain. It activates us, it gets our body moving, it gets our blood flowing when we need to respond to something. Back in the day, it was running from tigers and lions. It was making sure we could find food, those kinds of things. Nowadays, stress looks a little bit different, especially in this pandemic. But what I'd like to remind folks about is that the stress response is the exact same. It's the same part of our brain that responds to stress. And so one of the problems with that is that our brain is used to using that fight, flight, freeze response for very different things than what our present day stressors are. And our brain is not as good at managing our present day stressors as it was originally adapted for. We deal much better in some ways, we deal much better with lions and tigers and bears than we do with the kind of ongoing stressors of today. So we wanted to kind of dive into another Menti and just get a sense of there's a reason y'all showed up here today. What's causing stress? What's causing distress? I'm going to stop sharing the screen and ask you to kind of add your thoughts into the Menti. We'd love to hear what's going on for folks and what is causing challenges right now, causing stress.
Thanks so much for everyone for participating. Things are coming up. I'm going to be sharing that with you right now. All right, uncertainty. That's huge. Too much workload.
One of the things I like about Menti is that the more people who enter a particular word, the bigger it gets. And so if you're seeing big words, it's because it's because others are experiencing something similar. It looks like a big part of this is work and the uncertainty of work. Oh, yes, somebody just asked for the code again. It's there at the top of the screen, 8292332. Uncertainty just keeps getting bigger and bigger there. That is so much of this time right now. I just keep thinking about the number of updates we get at staff meetings where they say, this is what's coming next week. And then the following week, that's not what's coming anymore. There's been so many changes about when we get to go back or if we get to go back. Amount of time on Zoom, that's very meta in this moment. I'm sorry to put you back on Zoom, given how much time we're spending here these days.
Yeah.
Ennui, grief. It's funny, we had a slide on grief for this presentation and we took it out, but I think it's a really important one to name. There is so much loss happening right now. There is so much that is not within our control. We're all just kind of expected to keep going.
Yeah.
Particularly challenging.
Staying indoors. Yeah, all the restrictions that are placed on us, which isn't necessarily a choice. And really, our next question for you is, how do you experience stress? What do you notice in your body? What happens to your breath? What thoughts are running through your head? Are there any specific emotions showing up? And what kind of things do you say to yourself?
So one of the things we wanted to touch in on is yeah, these are just noticing the amount of physical impacts that stress has. You know, we kind of talk about stress as this thing that happens in the top of our brain, and yet you can see that it's impacting very physical aspects of what's going on. And one of the things we really want to highlight, because it's kind of the point of our presentation, is just noticing that the things that are causing stress are not the same as how you are experiencing your stress. And so part of what we kind of want to touch on in the next hour is how to separate those two out. We realize that we can't cancel the pandemic. We can't fix the number of Zoom meetings that you're in. We can't solve tensions with family or friends, but we can talk to you about how to sit with that stress and how to work with that stress. And so a lot of what we want to talk about is just taking that moment to separate those two pieces out.
Yeah. I'm going to stop share my screen now so that Kira can share her screen. And before we dive into the stress cycle and some concrete strategies on how to complete the stress cycle, we just wanted to touch on burnout. And burnout has been described as the experience of feeling overwhelmed and exhausted by everything you have to do, and yet somehow still worried that you're not doing enough. This is a quote from the Nagoski sisters, whose material research actually has helped us in developing this presentation for you today.
I'm just wondering, even with like a little symbol or anything, does any, putting it up on your screen, does anybody connect with this right now? Is anybody feeling this definition?
We've got a few thumbs ups and it's climbing. Yep, definitely. Wow.
Yeah. This feels real.
Yeah, and it is real.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, it's me, isn't it? There
yes.
we go. I think one of the reasons we wanted to give the definition of burnout is that what we know is that burnout happens when stress, which is what we kind of named already, is at a high enough intensity and a long enough duration. And so I can't think of a better thing than a pandemic, than all of the kind of lack of control, lack of certainty to bring on something like burnout. So part of me is naming it just to, if anything, normalize that it makes sense that a lot of folks are feeling burnt out or feeling close to burnout at this time. And just to kind of give you a little bit more, the research on burnout names 3 different components: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and what we mean by that is not really feeling connected to yourself, not really feeling connected to your values, not really feeling connected to a sense of accomplishment within yourself. And that last piece, a feeling of trying really hard, but not actually accomplishing the things you want to accomplish.
I guess we're going to ask the question again, but we had a Mentimeter question set up for it that was a little bit more than yay or nay. So our question to you is, are you experiencing burnout right now?
So it's actually nice to see that there's a bit of a balance here. Not everyone's quite at the end of that burnout continuum. But I'm also seeing a lot of folks who are there.
Yeah. And I hope this visualization really helps to highlight that you're not alone in how you're feeling. Yeah. Or in your experience either.
So a lot of our presentation is based on research by these two, the Emily and Amelia Nagoski. Yes, they are sisters. In fact, they are identical twins. And one of them has a PhD in public health. The other has a PhD in music composition. We wanted to, 1, give you a break from our voices, but 2, we realized that we could summarize what they say in their book and in their research, but they do a much nicer job. And the other thing we wanted to name, there is a lot of Zoom use right now, so this is a really good opportunity if you want to look away from the screen or to just listen in. They are very charming presenters, but you don't necessarily need to kind of watch what's going on with them. So here they are. For the record, their book is called Burnout, and it's a very good read, and but also they just summarize everything in the next 6 minutes, so you can see it here. Please let me know. Actually, I just realized I didn't share sound, so 1 second. I'm just going to do that quickly.
It sounds like some folks are familiar with the podcast that the sisters did with Brene Brown, which is fantastic. How familiar?
Yes, great podcast.
So about halfway through that program,
Amelia here is talking about doing her PhD and the burnout she experienced in her PhD. And so her sentence there was halfway through that program.
I woke up in the middle of the night with abdominal pain so bad I thought I was going to die. Go to the emergency room, and they did not know what was wrong with me, so they kept me there for 4 days, admitted me to the hospital, would not let me leave for 4 days, eventually went, "We don't know what's wrong with you. It's probably just stress. Go home and relax." Relax. That is not an evidence-based intervention for stress relief, by the way. But luckily, I have a sister with a PhD in public health. So she brought me books and peer-reviewed research, and I started reading.
That is how I express my love.
Here, Amelia, it's peer-reviewed. Thanks, Emily. So I'm reading this book, and I get to this page, and it says, emotions are stored in your body, and repressed rage can show up as pain, physical pain. And I'm like, oh my, the word rage there on the page stabs into me like it's a claw. And I just sat my ass down right there in the middle of my house and called my sister, because that's what you do. Emily, this book says that rage is in your body. And she's like,
how could you not have known that already?
Because my job as a conductor is to communicate emotion with my body. But somehow I didn't know that emotion was always in my body. So then I learned the stuff that we're going to talk about today, and it saved my life. So I reminded Emily of this, and she said,
We should write a book about that.
so we did. It's called Burnout. And burnout is the experience of feeling overwhelmed and exhausted by everything you have to do, and yet somehow still worried that you're not doing enough. Burnout Burnout is caused by emotional exhaustion. So what's an emotion and how do you exhaust it? If you've seen any of Emily's 3 TED Talks or were listening 2 minutes ago, you know that emotions are tunnels. You have to move all the way through the darkness to get to the light at the end. And you exhaust an emotion when you get stuck in the tunnel. It's a beautiful metaphor, but what actually happens?
Physiologically, what happens, this is what I taught Amelia, and it's what I ultimately wrote in Come As You Are. Emotions are these biological cycles with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Like digestion, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you get stuck and don't go all the way through to the end, not so good things happen. So let me talk about how the stress response cycle in particular is supposed to work. In our environment of evolutionary adaptiveness, the stress response would be activated by a perceived stressor, like a lion. It's coming right for you. And so what do? You run, yeah. And your body does these miraculous things. Your blood pressure increases, your heart rate increases, your respiration rate increases, your immune system gets suppressed, your reproductive system gets suppressed, your digestive system gets suppressed, because who needs those right now? You're trying to run. And at this point, there's only 2 possible outcomes. Either you get eaten by the lion, in which case none of the rest of this matters, or you escape the lion. So let's imagine a world where you're running across the savannas of Africa, lion chasing you. Somebody sees you coming back to the village and they go, come run in my door. And you run behind them in the door and you slam your shoulders against the door and you hear the lion going, roar, and it scratches at the door and eventually it gives up and it wanders away. And you watch the lion disappear. And you turn toward this person who just saved your life, and you feel grateful to be alive. You love your friends and family. The sun seems to shine brighter. Your immune system comes back online. Your reproductive system comes back online. Your digestive systems come back online. That is the complete stress response cycle. We are, alas, almost never chased by lions anymore. Our stressors instead tend to be things like deadlines, our children, traffic, white supremacist, cis heteropatriarchal, rabidly exploitative post-industrial capitalism. So when you are stressed out by those things, what do? This is where the problem starts. The behaviors that deal with the stress in our body, the behaviors that complete the stress response cycle, are separate from the behaviors that actually deal with the solutions to our stressors.
But that's really good news, because it means that, for me, I did not have to wait until grad school was over before I started to feel better. I could start to feel better immediately, and in fact, because I was starting to feel better, it meant that I could make it to the end. The reverse is also true, though. Just because you've managed a stressor and it's over does not mean necessarily that you've dealt with the stress itself. We talked with an activist in Ireland who helped get abortion legalized in Ireland, and she said that they thought when the vote passed, they would all feel amazing, but instead they all collapsed. They were exhausted. And the reason is, your body can be made safe by legislation, but your body doesn't know that. In order to tell your body that it's safe, you have to complete the stress response cycle. Step 1, separate the stress from the stressor. Step 2, turn toward the stress with kindness and compassion and complete the cycle. Today,
I know I left you on a nice little ellipses there. We're gonna stop listening to these two, as charming as they are, because we want to kind of dive into what they're talking about, completing the stress cycle, finding some strategies to work with the stress, not the stressors. So yeah, just to reemphasize, this is kind of the main message of their presentation. The stressors and the stress response are 2 different pieces. And like we said, a lot of the stressors are not within our power to change. But the stress response is within our power to change. And I want to be really clear, it can often come across as a little trite or a little cheesy, like we're basically naming self-care here. And in a time like this, self-care can feel a little cheap. It can feel a little blaming in that you're not managing your stress because you're just not doing these things. And so we want to name that we're going to talk about some strategies. Some of them seem quite simple. Some of them you probably heard about before. We're going to talk about, and we also acknowledge that that's not the whole story. And we also acknowledge that there are things that are not within your power, and that's very real. And so we don't want to kind of minimize that piece in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add to that, Michelle?
No, I think you summarized that incredibly well. I think next we're going to introduce you to the 9 strategies in terms of some strategies on how to complete the stress cycle. As you had read or heard, excuse me, in terms of how the Nagoski sisters had described it, one of their favorite metaphors is that emotions are tunnels. If you go all the way through them, you get to the light at the end. And again, I think as Kira has already mentioned, we know that some of these strategies are very simple and that you've probably heard of them before, you maybe even have tried it, but that's the entire point. They are purposely simple because often when we are activated, we can't engage in complex tasks, excuse me. So we invite you to just think about some of the strategies that we introduced today that might seem unfamiliar and which ones you might be willing to experiment with.
Is this me?
Yes.
This is just a very basic one. This is probably one you are all familiar with, but it is surprising how often we forget the basics sometimes. One of the things that Emily Nagoski talks about, because in her other book, Come As You Are, is that they actually found a difference between folks who can send their breath kind of midway to their chest and folks who are able to send their breath all the way to their belly. So that ability to slow your breath down enough to deepen your breath actually has an impact on your nervous system, actually has an impact on how calm you're feeling in any given moment. So I encourage you with this, like just try right now, try a breath or two with this circle in and out. Just see if you can deepen your breath, lengthen your breath all the way down to your belly button. I sometimes actually suggest to clients to actually poke their belly button a little bit. It makes it easier to find with your breath. Just take a moment to take a couple breaths in and out.
I was going to add that for some folks, sometimes it's really hard to get yourself into that place where you can breathe into your belly. And there's actually a little bit of a trick in terms of how to do that. And if you don't mind, I'd be happy to share that with you today. All you really need to do is clasp your hands in front of you, place your hands behind your head, and open up your elbows. Try giving that a try and try breathing in for a count of 4. And breathing out for a count of 4. Basically, by opening up your airway like that, your breath can get to your belly, which is the goal.
I didn't know that, Michelle. I didn't know I'd be learning things today too. This is great. That's cool.
Before we dive into the next strategy, we invite you to just pay attention to your body. I'm just curious to know, has anyone noticed anything different about how their body feels after engaging in some belly breathing? Again, feel free to use the chat if you'd like to make a comment, and if not, that's okay. We'll keep moving on. Well, I think we're good to go, Kira, for the feeling the feeling.
This strategy might also be pretty obvious to a lot of folks, but oh, someone's feeling better. That's nice.
Yeah.
Feel the feeling. this can feel kind of basic, but what we know about a lot of our jobs is that in a professional world, in a place where you're supposed to kind of be in charge, you're supposed to be the calm one, it tends to mean that sometimes we tuck aside the other emotions we might be feeling. And so what we're naming here is maybe you don't necessarily need to feel the feelings in the moment, but it's worth kind of putting a pin in it and saying, I experienced some stress in that moment. I experienced some anger. I experienced some sadness. Find a moment later on, find a moment in a place of safety where you can actually experience those feelings again. Have a good cry, punch a pillow if you're angry. These are really basic things again, but in a time of stress, we forget to kind of check in on emotions that happened earlier in the day and give those emotions space to go fully through the tunnel. And so slowing down at the end of the day, noticing if there were any emotions that came up that you didn't get to feel in the moment your boss was standing there or a student was the one who was struggling. Take a moment to give yourself that moment to feel those feelings as well.
The next strategy we would invite you to engage in is laughter. And what we're talking about is the big kind of belly laughter. When you just find something so funny, it's like you can't even control it. For me personally, whenever I need a big laugh, I have a video tucked away of my niece, who's 3, dancing at the dinner table, not on it, to K-pop. For some reason, whenever I see this video, I just cannot stop laughing. And we invite you to maybe, we're going to share with you a video. I don't know if it's going to produce the same kind of big belly laugh that my niece does for me, but we hope that it does for you. We just thought it was funny and cute.
And we're also aware that this video is very viral at the moment. So if you've seen it before, we apologize. I've also few times and I still keep laughing. So hopefully you'll join us in this. It went viral last week and it was pretty entertaining. So. It's just loading. Give it a second. This was a Zoom video that actually happened.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take
we're trying to, can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can see that. I think if you click the up arrow next to this.
My favorite part of that video is Jerry in the top corner, who only pays attention once the guy says, I'm not a cat. So I think that really caught Jerry's attention.
Well, so I hope you got a laugh out of that. Sorry, go ahead.
Just a light laugh for your Friday morning.
Yeah.
The next one sorry, go ahead.
No, please go, Kira.
The next one we want to name is touch. And the first thing I want to acknowledge is that touch is particularly challenging in COVID times. Not everybody has the same access to touch as previous times. And so I want to acknowledge there's a privilege piece in naming touch. And what we also know is that touch on your own, touch for yourself is also very effective. Even just gentle, caring things that you might do for another, like a touch to the cheek or a touch to the heart, can have a similar calming effect, can have a similar kind of stress reducing effect. One of the ones that I suggest to clients all the time is a rub to the back of the neck. There are loads of nerve endings in the back of your neck. And just giving some pressure, just giving a rub along your spine, along that connection between your neck and your head, is a very simple way of creating some calm and releasing some tension.
The next strategy is physical activity. Really, with physical activity, you can release so much stress from that you might be holding in your body. I mean, I don't know. I think the Carlton dance would be quite strenuous, personally, with all the energy that he puts into it. But yeah, it's just a really amazing way to kind of get rid of a lot of that tension in your body and get those good endorphins happening. You know, certainly with physical activity, I think the more regularly, I guess, you can engage in it, the more regularly you can complete that stress cycle. Kira, did you want to add anything about physical activity?
I think it's just like one of the things I often say is this is where silliness can also come in. I find it a little bit weird to sometimes share this with clients, but they always appreciate it. The hokey pokey is probably one of the best ways to decrease stress. It's not just for your kids. And one of the reasons that the hokey pokey works particularly well is that it's got a shake in it. And what we know from lots of research at this point is shaking is kind of moving your body in a quick way is a stress release. We see it in animals all the time. We see it in dogs in particular, but animals in the wild shake out after a stressful experience all the time. So finding a way to shake, finding a way to do the hokey pokey is an incredibly simple but effective way to release some of that stress. And also just watching Carlton is probably helpful as well. It's really nice presenting to an older group. A lot of our students didn't know who this was, so this is really nice to have people recognize who it is. I apologize, my computer's having a bit of trouble moving forward in slides, so. Social connection, another one that I know is challenging at this time. We're not allowed to go on walks necessarily. The only thing we're allowed to do is go on walks. And it's not quite the same connection as maybe we once might have had with a lot of our social connections. And the only other option is Zoom. And so this is not ideal, but what we know is that feeling like you can be genuine with another, feeling like you can relax with another is a very important way to complete the stress cycle. And so I know it's challenging at this time, but we just this is an opportunity to find some creative ways to feel like you can be genuine with another, to feel like you can let your guard down with another.
The next strategy we want to talk about is creative expression. I think, Kira, you had mentioned that one of your mentors had always had suggested to you that when it comes to creative expression, it's always best to kind of choose something with beginning, middle, and end. Is that correct? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Basically, the idea behind it is, it was my supervisor in our line of work. She said, we don't get a lot of clear beginnings, middles, and ends in our work. And I feel like that might be the case for a lot of you as well. It's hard to know when something has a clear wrap up. It's hard to know when you've kind of fully done your job. And there's something really essential about finding the rest of your life that give you that sense of, I started something, I'm in the middle of something, I'm at the end of something. I'll share just this weekend, I finally finished my pandemic crochet blanket. It took me all 11 months, but it feels incredibly good to have an ending. It feels incredibly good to see a completed project and feel like that's a clear ending. Feel like that's something I can now tuck away and be done with. We don't get to tuck a lot of things away and be done with them. It's why baking became such a big deal during the pandemic. Another clear beginning, middle, and end, and a reward of something delicious at the end. Sorry, I took over there, Michelle.
No, that's all right. And I was just going to add, sometimes we don't have 11 months to finish a crochet project, or we don't have like 3 hours to, I don't know how long it takes, 3 hours to set aside to bake. I don't bake. So, I mean, but there are other smaller ways of creatively expressing yourself that could take just a few moments. And one of those might be, starting to learn how to create origamis with a piece of paper that you could kind of keep at your desk or at your work from home desk that you can just kind of quickly engage in for a couple of minutes. And there is clearly a beginning, middle, and end.
5 senses. Just this is a really simple one, and basically what we're naming here is mindfulness. But one of the quickest ways to slow down our stress response, to shift how our body's feeling, is to tune into the present moment. And it's hard to do in these times. It's hard to do when there's hundreds of deadlines heading your way. It's something I try to do every morning. I take a moment with my coffee cup and I feel the warmth in my hands. I feel the scent in my nose. I taste my coffee. I just give myself that 20 seconds to just be in that moment. One of the kind of biggest challenges we're all experiencing right now is the fact that our eyes are only focusing on this screen that is 1.5 feet in front of us at all times. And so one of the things that's also really important is activating your senses to other things, is looking beyond that screen sometimes and seeing the sunshine outside your window, looking at a picture that you've got beside you, looking at that origami crane you just made, changing where your eyes are looking already activates your senses in a different way and calms your senses a little bit. So it's just a little reminder to sometimes tune into those really simple tools that you have at your disposal all the time, and seeing if you can activate them in different ways than you usually do.
The last strategy we'd invite you to experiment with is ritual. Creating a ritual kind of to signify perhaps the end of your workday. I think it's so hard, especially because we're working, a lot of us are working from home, I think, is that, how do you separate your home space in particular between the end of the workday and then entering into your home life and into your home space? I'll give you an example. For me, it's tucking away my laptop. It has its home, it's hidden in a closet. And for me, that's my ritual, putting the laptop away. Kira, did you have a ritual that you use to kind of signify the end of your day?
Mine is putting the laptop away as well. I do have a friend who just shared that at the beginning of her day, she leaves her house, walks around the block, and comes back in. And then at the end of her day, she leaves her house, walks around the block, and comes back in. And it's really simple, but for her, that's the indication that the day has begun and then the day has ended. And it's really simple things like this that I think we've talked to a lot of students too who are trying to figure out what to do when their computer's in their bedroom. How do you kind of disconnect from that? So we talk a lot about like covering up your computer, finding a way to light a candle at the end of the day, anything to kind of, again, create that clear ending, create that clear sense of shift. I think that was our whole piece. We really just wanted to kind of throw out a few ideas, a few pieces around how to kind of shift how things are feeling at the moment.
Well, thank you, folks. It looks like those are all the comments that we have for this morning. Please enjoy the sunshine while it lasts. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day that leads up to hopefully a relaxing weekend for you.